Right. So the key thing is, if I were to graph overweight, so this is 0, and this was the social cost, right? I said it was sort of like, some convex thing, right? The question is what do the bribes look like, right? So if I was to graph the bribes on the same thing, and I was to graph, so if this is social cost, right, I would hope that the bribes would be something like this, right? And if so, then I might say, well, gee, yes, it would be nicer if the government got that money rather than the people manning the way stations, but as someone I think pointed out last time, maybe you pay the people at the way stations less, so kind of all washes out. But at least that would be not inefficient. On the other hand, suppose you saw the bribes look like this. Right? Then what would you conclude?
The amount being paid is probably at the high end of weight is less than the marginal cost.
Right, but what we care about, you're right. So you're right, that's true. But the question is, we care not just about the level, but we also care about the slope. Right? So we care about sort of saying, look, as a truck driver, if I'm thinking of adding 1 extra ton, what's the marginal cost that I pay? Right? And so let me be more precise. Imagine I drew it like this. Okay? So imagine that was the bribes were always higher than the social cost, but flat. Would that be efficient or inefficient? Someone else? Yeah?
Be inefficient because the marginal cost of adding 1 extra ton to your truck is 0. So if you're gonna pay anyway that same bribe, might as well overload as much as you can.
Exactly. Right. So how am I, as I am a truck driver, how do I solve this problem? Well, I basically think of so there's a cost which is a function of I'm the truck driver, so these got cost which is a function of weight, right? And then I pay a bribe, which is a function of weight. Right? So how am I gonna solve that problem? Well, I'll set I need that the, my personal marginal cost, right, C prime of W has to be equal to B prime of W, right? Plus it's probably revenue. Sorry, I should make this is not totally clear. Sorry, let me rephrase. Sorry. Suppose this is profits as a function of weight. I suppose there's no marginal cost except for bribes, then I would pay minus bribes as a function of weight. There we are, right? So I would set the marginal return of profits has to be equal to the marginal bribe that I pay for as a function of weight, right? So in this case, right? In this case, because this thing is convex, right? There's a very high marginal cost, high and increasing marginal cost from the bribes. In this case, the level cost of the bribes is high, but the derivative is very small. Right? So if we imagine that pi is kind of down, if we imagine that we're in a world that like this, where pi to 1 prime is less than 0, then we're going to end up where so we have concave returns of adding more weight. Then in this case, we're going to have more overweight trucks than in this case. Is that clear? So the key is the slope, not the level. Okay. So here's the answer. So we actually got the bribes. We have the weight of the trucks, and so we can plot these non-parametric regressions of the weight of the bribe against the weight. And what we find is, in general, so it is upward sloping, so that's good, right? The more overweight you are, the more you pay. But these levels are really small. So the payment here, 100 is $10. Okay, so the difference between going in being not overweight at all, first of all, people who are not overweight at all still pay bribes. That's bad, right? That has no kind of social efficiency gain. And the difference between being sort of not overweight at all and being 30 tons overweight, which is a lot, is $10. Right? And so given what I described, kind of what the official fines are supposed to be, I think this is plausibly much, much flatter than kind of what it's supposed to be. right? And so it is the case that that you should pay more if you're more overweight, but it's really flattened it out compared to what the social cost would be, and therefore it's not surprising that people are driving way overweight. Okay, so I think the key point that to think about this is that just because we see bribe is not necessarily the same as knowing that it is or isn't efficient, and you want to think about sort of how the bribery is changing kind of the marginal costs to bad behavior, whether that's getting a license and being unable to drive, or driving an overweight truck.